Eric Martin, Lewis Clark State College, History 102 students. Let's talk about the setup for Chapter 21, Capitalism and the Industrial Revolution. So, in this particular chapter, we're really trying to think about the origins of both industrialization and capitalism. So, one of the things that you're going to want to do as you go through the chapter is come up with some distinguishing characteristics for the two because they're overlapping, but they're not the same. And so you want to be able to distinguish between the two. This is particularly the case with capitalism because I don't think that we operate off a very clear definition about exactly what that is. And it has to be something more than markets. Markets have been around since the beginning of civilization. Not necessarily the beginning of time, but the beginning of cities. We've had markets. But markets are not the same as capitalism. So they're involved, but they're not the same. So make sure you can make that distinction. Now let's go through some of these documents bit by bit so I can kind of give you a heads up on what to look for. Arnold Pacey. This is a classic piece by a historian of technology looking at India and thinking about how India had industrialized, how India had been working on the development of capitalism, and how the British come to India and what the interaction is between British efforts to industrialize, British efforts to develop capitalism, and Indian efforts on that front. So look at that dynamic. That's really what you're on the lookout for, the dynamic. What's going on in India that the British adapt? What's going on in Britain that the Indians adapt? What kind of dialogue is going on? A technological dialogue is what he calls it. This next piece by Kaiho Seiro, you're really looking at the transformation of values in Japan. So, based on the piece, what do kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, traditional values pre-1813 look? And as the Japanese become more modern, or attempting to become more modern, how do values look? And the value that you're looking at here particularly is profit, the position of profit. Okay. And I think that, we just need to keep in mind this idea that many cultures have a complicated relationship with the concept of profit, right? That there are certain things that are fine to profit from. There seems to be certain things that are off limits to profit from. There seems to be a certain limit to the amount of profit until you start getting into the unethical and the immoral realm. So what's the problem that he's laying out for Japanese readers? This next piece by Adam Smith, we talked about this real briefly in class, but the thing with Adam Smith is lots of people like to refer to him. Very few people have read him. You're going to read a little bit of him. So this is from The Wealth of Nations. Really look for some of the conceptual issues here in terms of how the economy works. And he makes this argument about efficiency and what that means and kind of its impact. He talks a little bit about the division of labor and how the division of labor improves economic production and efficiency. But it also has side effects in terms of on a human being. So take a look for that, kind of get the complicated take there. He talks about an issue called comparative advantage. So you're going to want to kind of know a little bit about what that is, where he's making this argument that countries should make what they're good at and sell it on the open market and buy the rest. right? So take a look at that. And then he's also going to make a argument about what the relationship he sees as being between the state and the economy. What kind of relationship in 1776, so the date on this is important, does he see as an appropriate relationship? Okay, Adam Smith. The Sadler Report of the House of Commons is a primary source looking at issues of child labor in the 1830s. So you can use that document as a way of measuring some of the things that Adam Smith says. And you can also use it as a way of measuring some of the things that Marx and Engels say that are going to come up in the next document. But before we get there, the Sadler Report. It's really an interview with Michael Crabtree. He's in his 20s. He was a child laborer, and he's basically describing what it was like and, what he thinks it did for him and what he thinks it did to him. So pay attention to that. Okay, get an idea about what that child labor situation was like. Marx and Engels. The thing that I'm going to ask you to do with the Marx and Engels document is to erase from your memory what you think you know about communism, because most of us use a 1948 reference date for communism. We think about it's the Russians, it's the Cold War, it's 20th century. This is an 1848 document. The point of reference is Charles Dickens. That's what you should be thinking. That's the kind of world that they're dealing with at the time. So go through that document. And really, in that particular document, there is a critique of capitalism that's laid out, and there is a solution to the issue that's laid out. So you could just go, what's the critique? What are the solutions? That seems like a reasonable way to go. And then we're going to spend some time comparing Adam Smith to Marx and Engels, because usually these are the two economic philosophers that get pitted against one another, as if it's like Adam Smith versus Marx and Engels. I'm not sure that it has to be that way. So keep in mind that the Adam Smith piece is written in 1776. The Marx and Engels piece is written in 1848. How can they both be right? Right? And I do wonder if capitalism itself and industrialization itself has a history and it changes. And I wonder if the slice of capitalism and industrialization that Adam Smith is getting a look at in 1776 is the same thing that Marx and Engels are looking at in 1848. And then there's ways we can do that to kind of see, well, what changed? All right. And then you got this piece by Sergei Witt, which is looking at the situation in terms of industrialization and capitalism in Russia. So there's countries attempting to play catch up, or they see that some countries are taking off, and this industrialization and these machines are really going to change things, and they want in. And then you've got these last two documents. Looking at, kind of the role of workers and what the new global workplace looks like, for lack of a better way to put it. So if you can keep those kinds of things in mind as you go through the documents, I think that it'll be a little bit easier to read. These are fun documents to read. I think they're fun documents to read. Take your time with the Smith piece. Take your time with the Marx and Engels piece. You're going to want to think about those because there's a lot in there. And that's it. I'll see you in class.